I'm Heather. This is Matt and Nat. And we want to talk about a paradigm shift in global development and how cross-pollination and collaboration are enabling that shift. But first, I am one of the 2008 PopTech Fellows, known as the Guinea Pig Years. And I run a firm in Denver, Colorado called Catapult Design. And we are a design firm working with social entrepreneurs around the globe. And I have to credit PopTech with at least 20% of Catapult's overall design portfolio. That's essentially why I come back every year. I've had the chance to work with some of my fellows, like Nick Martin of Tech Change, Laura Stachel of We Care Solar, Tevis Howard of Komaza. And I've also pulled some of the people that I've met here in the community into my work back on the Navajo Nation, teaching and mentoring some of our small business owners, folks like Peter Durand up there sketching. And I've also forged some of Catapult's strongest partnerships through the people that I've met during random lunches and our receptions and whatnot. So I hope that's just a small testament of the power of this network and this community and this platform for some of the fellows. So the last time I was on this stage, I spoke about my journey and my motivation. I talked about the hard life on the Navajo Nation with my grandpa's house. And I shared this story about how we used to haul water to his house in these giant steel drums, how we went down these big bumpy roads in the back of the truck, probably losing half the water in the process, and how we had to do that every time that we wanted to wash hands, bathe, make food, and how those experiences essentially shaped my desire to create tools that enable better livelihoods for others. The last time I was on this stage, I had just created Catapult. So it's now been almost 8 years, 53 design projects in 14 countries since then. And what excites me now is the cross-pollination of all this work. So Catapult's still a player in the global development stage, but we've slowly been building a small portfolio of work back home on the Navajo Nation. And the premise behind that work is to take some of these ideas that we've experienced in Kenya, in Peru, in India, and bring them home to the res where we have a lot of the same social challenges, but entrepreneurship and innovation is sorely missing. So that also led to this new collaboration between Catapult Design and Nairobi-based Brick. So to tell you first a little bit more about Brick and their product, I'd like to introduce Nat Manning.
Hello, everybody. So my story is also one of a bit of a culture clash. I'm a white American male, and I work for a Kenyan tech company, and I'm based in Silicon Valley. So I guess I'm like the local field staff, blending in with everybody else there. And we at Brick, we do hard things. We particularly work on connectivity in places where there's really difficult infrastructure. And one of the key places where this need exists is in education. We went out and interviewed a bunch of teachers when we learned this and asked them what their problems were. And they said, look, I have to have 2 lesson plans for every class, one for when the tech works and one for when it doesn't. We said, why doesn't it work? Well, the technology breaks all the time. There's no reliable connectivity. The electricity goes on and off all the time. And I don't know how to fix these things. Like, I'm a teacher. I'm not an IT professional. And so we set out to fix that solution, or create that solution, and fix those problems. And we came up with the Kio Kit here. This is the Kio Kit, which has 40 tablets in it that can drop on the ground. But the most important thing I want to get across is this works completely online and offline. So when the internet decides that it might not want to show up, all the content stored here locally in the hard drive and server, all the applications, all of the, we have Wikipedia and Khan Academy and a bunch of localized content and games. And then when the web decides it does want to show up, it syncs up with the broader internet. And the story of actually building this was another one of PopTech lore. So I'm going to pass it off to Matt to tell you a little bit about that.
Thanks, Nat. My name is Matt Schoenholtz. I'm a designer and maker living in Seattle. And I've been coming to PopTech now for about 8 years, which is where I met Eric and Nat. And 2 years ago, at the close of the conference, we're all inspired, like many of us are after these conferences. We were talking about ways that we could collaborate. And Nat mentioned, he's like, hey, we have an upcoming trip. We're testing brick. Why don't you join us? You can see how we do this. And so a month later, I landed in Johannesburg, and we started this 3-week journey on the way back to Nairobi, driving through rural Africa and just seeing this, like, the dusty, bumpy road. And we started talking about connectivity. And in 3 weeks' time, with guys in a very small Defender driving up, there's a lot of time to talk. And so we started talking about education and how connectivity and education could come together. And so a lot of the ideas for KioKit sort of were formed, and we started talking through different solutions. And a month later, Eric called me and said, hey, we have a rough prototype. I was like, oh, that's so awesome to hear. I said, but we have this huge meeting, and we have some problems with what we have. We have a tangle of wires, we have some fragile connections, and we need some help designing the kit, the school in the box. And so I said, great, how can I help? And he said, well, in 10 days, we need 6 prototypes. I was like, okay, well, I'm in Seattle, and it's going to take me a day to get there. And he said, but we don't really have all the resources here to build it, all the tools. And so I said, cool, let's get going. And so right then, we started working, didn't really worry about contracts or anything like that. It was like, time is pressing. And so we got to working, and we talked through all the critical issues that we're having. So there's everything from how do you keep dust out of it? How do you keep water out of it? It's got to drop out of the back of a pickup truck and be okay. Kids are plugging in and out these micro USB points, and I was like, okay, well, that's seems like our number one point of failure right there is the fragile micro USB connection. So we realized that we had to design a solution that got rid of the cords. And so we came up with a very simple solution that uses the slots, and it has inductive coils inside there. So as soon as you slide one of the tablets down in the slot, it starts charging. So there's no physical connection. The professor can see when they're charging with the green lights, and it was just a very simple solution. We had some prior experience doing it, and that sort of solved the problem right there. And so it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for tight collaboration and sort of the cross-pollination, as Heather was talking about, with the deep engineering knowledge that the brick team had, the contextual knowledge that they had in Africa, and then sort of the deep design experience that we had. And so coming together, Reg came over, we started building these, we were failing all the way up to day 8. We knew that we had to pull this thing together, and we finally did it. We pulled a couple all-nighters, sent Reg back with 6 of these cases on a plane Easter Sunday, and they got there for the meeting. And so it's awesome to see now they're sort of making them in Kenya. They're deployed in 9 countries, and really excited to hear what's next for KioKit.
I'm going to jump through a few of these. So about a year ago, I was talking with some old colleagues at the White House, who actually, some of them are here at PopTech for the first time, and they asked, I was telling them about brick, and they said, we have a lot of these problems here in the United States too, particularly on tribal lands. And so I thought about it, and I said, well, I've met Heather here at PopTech. And I called her up, and I didn't want to be presumptuous, right? I'm very used to seeing solutions looking for problems. And asked, hey, Heather, do you think that this could work here on the reservation?
And I said, I don't know. But fortunately, I was heading to a conference on the res just outside of Tuba City in Arizona, and it was an education technologies conference. So I hosted a brainstorm there with Navajo educators and principals, and I was asking them, so tell me, what keeps you from doing your job in the way that you want to do it? And they had a lot to say. They had 2 hours of content worth to say. They talked about how the lack of connectivity, not just at home, but at work, makes things difficult. They talked about how kids can't engage in the classroom because they've already spent hours getting to and from school every day on the bus. They talked about how some of those kids without electricity at home, essentially, homework is difficult, if not impossible. And they talked about the lack of communication between teachers and their parents, particularly rural parents who don't have the resources to get into school to meet with teachers. And these sounded familiar to us. So what we decided was to start a pilot where we would bring little KioKit here over to our US educators on the Navajo Nation. And what's exciting about this project is that it completely challenges the development paradigm, where we are exporting US-based solutions and expertise abroad to solve or fix problems. In this scenario, the problem is right here in the US, and it's a problem that's existed for decades, and we have not been able to crack that nut. And secondly, our theory is that the Nairobi-based designers and engineers, even though halfway around the world, likely have a more innate understanding of our challenges on the res and might be in a good position to help solve them. So we're very excited to announce this collaboration here with you guys today, and the reason that we did it is because we want you to participate. So if this sounds interesting to you, Nate and I are pretty friendly folks. Come join us. You'll always find us near the food and the booze, I would say. So thank you.